Hoi, 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 you lot. There's something we'd like to ask you. Hoi, 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 Boros. Hoi, 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 hoi.
Spoiler warning, I'm going to be talking about Walter and all his facets as a character. If you don't want any spoilers for SMT IV and its chaos route, or for the demonic gene manga, then click off this video and go read and play those said media pieces. And with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy this review and character analysis on Walter. For those of you who don't know who Walter is a samurai apprentice just like Flynn, who got chosen by the Gauntlet, and you go on adventures with him as a protagonist, Flynn. Now, what makes Walter so special and unique in his design is that he has short spiky black hair, slightly tan skinned, and some light colored eyes as well. He wields the gauntlet that all samurais use and wears the default samurai uniform, although he kind of pops his chest open for the fan service and the ladies, if you know what I'm saying. But he also wears a blue handkerchief around his neck, although it's really hard to see. He has piercings in his ears, a ring and 2 studs in his right ear, and 3 rings and a stud in his left ear. In the demonic gene manga, he is seen in a couple different outfits. The first is a dark shirt and dark pants, which he was forced into after being arrested. Once he reaches Tokyo, he takes a new set of clothes from a corpse, a black leather jacket, black jeans, and combat boots. Walter is best described as a rash young man who speaks bluntly, but despite his demeanor, he has a caring heart of gold and believes in doing what's best. He concluded that the nature of a samurai's duty is a perfect match with his personality. Since he comes from a family of Kaljuris, which are the lower or peasant people in the caste system of Mikado, like Flynn, you, the protagonist, he feels sympathy towards those who are looked down by the noble luxuriers, basically the people who are at the very top. Due to his boisterous nature and hot-headed attitude, he gets some friction with fellow rookie Jonathan. Though limited to minor scuffles at first, these simple little conflicts will eventually turn into a climatic clash of beliefs. Before I talk about Walter's grand sacrifice, I want to talk to you about the story of how he got to the sacrifice and what built him up to that point. So allow me to take you on a little bit of a tale of how Walter has played an instrumental role in SMT IV's story. Our story begins with Walter as a newly recruited samurai who exterminates demons. His main motivation for becoming a samurai in the first place is for the adventure, as well as to escape the life of being a mere Kaljuri fisherman. Walter immediately just warms up to Flynn. He just is like, bro, Nakama to Flynn. You know, he's a bro to Flynn. What else can I say? Over supposedly meeting him in a dream that he had not too long ago, as well as the fact that they're both Kaljuris, and an order largely made up of luxuriers, so it was a little bit of a connectivity, class connectivity there. Pay attention to that, we're going to be talking about that too. Now, we zoom forward a little bit and he gets met with Navarre. Navarre looks down on him and he doesn't like that. Navarre is the literal definition of the bad apples or the luxuriers. Navarre looks down on Kaljuris actively and overall just doesn't care for the man, just doesn't care at all. It was the same condescending attitude that made Walter want to participate in the whoever can complete the 3 challenge quests first. So, after you, the main protagonist Flynn, wins, Walter's informed by the samurai that Navarre has mysteriously gone missing and went to help him. However, he was ambushed by a mysterious hooded man, I wonder who that could be, and was injured as a result. So he meets up with the others after they defeat the horde summoned by the hooded man, only to feel a rushing feeling of fury as soon as Jonathan told him what's really going on. He wanted to teach Navarre a bit of a lesson and just talk to the man. He just wanted to talk. He just wants to talk. But after witnessing that breakdown Navarre had, he decided to not verbally insult him for his actions, and Jonathan implores him to not consider Navarre to be the representative of all luxuriers. Walter said, alright, you know what? This man right here, he's a bad apple. He's a special case. And he let him slide. He let it slide just this once. So, Walter was a real one for that. Thank you, Walty boy. Hoy boy.
Hoi!
After the events persisting with Navarre, you all decide to spy on Isabeau. You, the player, being Flynn, Jonathan, and Walter decide to see if you can get her to be embarrassed and drop her prim iron mask. After Isabeau catches you, she says that she's actually reading her manga in the moonlight so she can be able to see it better. During that conversation, Isabeau notices that there's a sort of fire coming from Kichigeorgi, and the four of them leave off from the rooftop. When the four of you arrive at Kichigeorgi Forest, you all encounter Isikar, who seems to transform into some type of demon. And if you, the player Flynn, elect to mercy kill him, Walter reassures that you did the right thing. It's from this point onward that you hear about this mysterious figure called the Black Samurai, a mysterious woman clad in ebon armor. Walter informs her that they will be taking her into custody, but she summons the Lilim Horde and escapes. The demon girls release a bewitching aura that renders Walter, Jonathan, and you, the player Flynn, unconscious, leaving Isabeau to fend them off alone.
You've come around.
Oh, thank goodness. You wouldn't awaken no matter how much we tried talking to you.
So the samurais show up to the monastery, and basically they assign them the task of hunting down the Black Samurai into the land of the unclean ones. Isabeau then shares a rumor she heard from the monks saying that Abbot Hugo's using the Black Samurai's escape as an opportunity to have the samurais collect more mystic relics from the underworld, to which our boy, the main protagonist, Walter, expresses his great disgust after hearing that terrible rumor. After going to the floor below the Hall of the Minotaur and kicking his butute, Walter asks if they can, rest, as his demons are really bugging him about being healed. So, upon finding a mysterious relic, a mystic relic one might even say, somewhat mysterious, somewhat mystic, in the excavation chambers that Burroughs identifies as his neutral special, gun. So he grabs the gun and they head into Tokyo. The samurai express awe at the strange sight of the underground city beneath Naraku. Walter's likening the skyscrapers to giant coffins. At the government office building in Shinjuku, the player character Flynn elects to decide to kill Kubaiko. Walter will give you a really disapproving look at you and say, "How dare you? Is that really the right thing to do?" He'll look at you like a disappointed mother looking at you with your grades. You capture the Black Samurai in Ikebukuro. Walter gets all angry because Hope said, "Yeah, I did this." He's just like the kid who claims that he did the whole project without doing any of the work. So not only is Hope also disappointed in Hugo for taking the credit, Walter also has to be further dismayed when he is forced to stand in the crowd at the Black Samurai's execution. Later on in the game, Sister Gabby sends you on a VIP rescue mission where you have to carry out masked men, and Walter carries out the second masked man out of Kagome Tower and to Mikado Castle.
We mean you no harm. We're here on a rescue. He's dreadfully emaciated. I don't think we should leave him this way.
Who are you?
A woman named Gabby of the Eastern Kingdom of Mikado asked us to come to your aid.
Gabby, huh?
Briefly leaving the party. So after all three VIPs are rescued, he asks Gabby who the three are and finds her knowledge on Tokyo to be pretty sus. Gabby gives him the good old workaround and say it's vital to the kingdom's future, and he asks what she means as he doesn't really understand that, only for her to completely ignore his question. He questions the new order to kill the Black Samurai, who is apparently risen from the dead, as they are now tasked with assassinating a woman that was already killed once. He is also surprised and one might even say shocked when the Astrokai's leader Tayama requests a meeting with the player character Flynn.
Tayama requests an audience with you in Shibuya.
What? Tayama. As in the Ashurakais. Hoi, is this your doing?
Later on in the story, they discover that the Black Samurai is actually the leader of the Ring of Gaia, Yuriko, and she reveals that she is the famed demon, Lilith. Walter is swayed by her words, intrigued by a world in which the strong can shape the world as they see fit, and stops Jonathan's attempt to strike her down because he wants to be able to change the world with his own strength. Jonathan decides to listen to Lilith and wants to go down to investigate the true face of evil beneath Roppongi and asks his friends not to kill her until he returns. He is seen conversing with Hikaru and Ginza and goes to the Florida Cafe to meet Fujiwara in order to learn how to get to the place Yuriko mentioned. However, The guard refused to let him enter until you, the player character Flynn, and the others arrive with the proof of membership courtesy of Hikaru. So Walter finally decides to grace us with his presence right after Jonathan did some speech 100 and convinced him to join the group again, as the demons will be too tough to handle alone, of course, power in numbers. So once the gang's in Tayama's pad, they learn what red pills are made of in Reverse Hills.
Raise the people we take from the underground cities here, and when the time comes, we harvest their brains.
He is then influenced by Yasumagasuhi's gas. Declares that he must make a confession to everyone. He is from a family of fishermen, but he is scared of fish. Then he runs off excitedly and then he just starts laughing like a maniac. Precious moment, wholesome moment, best moment from SMT IV. Enjoy it while you can, with everyone else acting equally as kooky or wholesome as Walter. They awaken the Hills building, only for Walter to confront Tayama over his utopia, revealing that Yuriko is a demon in the process. Hey, even the best slip up. That's all I gotta say, even the best slip up. So the samurai gang shows back up to Mikado, and after meeting the new management, aka the Four Heralds, he decides to just defect from the ranks of the samurai entirely. He sees the new management in Mikado no different than Tayama's utopia. So Walter hits you up, you, Flynn, the player character by the way, to go with him to meet up with Lilith and go meet him at the barracks to get ready. He will give his spiel on how he doesn't want to be bound to another man's rules and that following another person's rules won't necessarily make one's life better. He confesses he knows what Lilith is going to do is going to cause a lot of harm. No duh. But he sees no other option than to change the world from its current state. Agreeing to join him will cancel out Tayama's and Gabby's main quest, by the way, fun fact, to kill Yuriko/Lilith, and in turn will unlock Lilith to be available for demon fusion. Now armed with knowledge that the true paradise lies in a world ruled by the strong, might makes right as people would say, Walter plans to open the Yamato Perpetual Reactor, situated in Camp Ichigaya, but is met with the opposition by Tayama and his national defense divinities. Walter is surprised at Kogosaburo's revival when the two fight him, so after Omakane's defeat in Camp Ichigaya, he questions how it feels to be so strong but still under Tayama's control, like a dog under Makima's control. He learns a lesson from Michizani's words, and you know what that lesson is? When the incompetent are given power, it leads to the people suffering. After thanking Michizani for that valuable life lesson, he meets up with the man himself, Tayama, and refuses to heed any of his words of warning because of him harvesting people for red pills. So during the battle against Yamato Takeru, Tayama's ace demon, he will state to him that harmony is nothing but a sweet-sounding word, and that it is mere indulgence on the people of the weak that turns people into cowards. He would rather not lick each other's wounds, preferring to get even stronger by defeating him. With Yamato Takeru's defeat, he gets Tayama to hand over the remote, giving it to Flynn, the player, so he can decide whether to press the button or not. So after you, Flynn, the player character, press the funny button, Walter awakes alongside you, the player character, and Jonathan in Blasted Tokyo. Walter and Jonathan are back to arguing before Flynn awoke. He questions why they're at the Counter Demon Force base after he awakened and remembers going to meet Lilith with Flynn, conflicting Jonathan's own take of how things went down. So Walter is fed up with arguing and decides to walk outside and is shocked to see a desert and wonders what became of Lilith and Tokyo. He finds the landscape pretty unsettling, being filled with holes. So after defeating Pluto the Tormentor, Walter comments on how the air feels fresher, lighter even. Once Akira gives them the remote control to the Yamato reactor, they activate it once again. Next, the three awaken in Infernal Tokyo, where they help this world's Akira usurp power from King Kenji, who controls Camp Ichigaya, and their only means home. Walter encourages the demonoid Akira to be more forceful and assertive, despite the latter lacking power. Once Kenji is defeated, the Yamato reactor is activated again, sending them to the realm of the white. Walter meets up with you, the player character Flynn, in the monochrome forest, telling of things how he would destroy the order of things to the white. He is surprised when Hikaru reveals her true identity and questions why she's there. After learning how to escape the forest, he decides to hunt down the white with you to escape. He calls White Isakar a coward during the battle, and after the battle realizes they held no hostility despite being enemies. Quite strange. Wonder why. Understanding that different ideals result in each side fighting into the end, there seemingly is no compromise, one might even say. But you and Walter arrive at Camp Ichigaya, and after being at the Yamato Perpetual Reactor, you're left with a choice, rather yet a fate that can't be escaped. You now approach the sacrifice behind the Hoi. Now I really want to get into the real video, talking about the sacrifice behind the Hoi. It is at this point in the story that Walter is giving an amazing, heart-tugging speech about why he's fusing with Lucifer right now. It's not because of the people like Jonathan or for any other weak-ass reason like that. It's because he thinks he has peaked in his life. He believes that by fusing with Lucifer, he can create the world of the strong, the might makes right world that he's always envisioned and desired ever since he was a boy. Because the current caste system, or really the abolished caste system, just hasn't been treating him well whatsoever. It has benefited a certain type of people and they couldn't do anything to change their destinies about it. So it's not the fact that Walter wanted to change the world just because might makes right. He wanted to change the world because he wanted to give people a choice to choose their own destinies. If you have the strength to create your own destiny, you can do it. And I'll get into more of that in part 3. So after that amazing speech by Walter, he finally fuses in with Lucifer, and there's just something that the player character feels after that. There's a sort of impact as the fusion is bloody, gory, blood splatters on your 3DS screen, and all you see is a eldritch, horrid abomination called Demon Lord Lucifer. While Walter's conscience has died and his physical body is gone, his memories reside in Lucifer, so that's the only comfort that you really have. Lucifer will tell you, hey, you know, Walter's still alive somewhere. Granted, he's not actually alive, but he's still alive somewhere, and he'll use that as fuel to motivate you to take down Merkaba, the god of law. Now, before we even think about moving on, because I'm not going to go any further than the sacrifice, I overstepped my boundaries by talking about the goal at the end of the Chaos route. It's hard to describe the impact of Walter's sacrifice. To some people, his sacrifice doesn't mean a thing because his motives weren't well explained throughout the game. It was kind of thrown in every once in a while saying, oh yeah, Walter's just doing this because he thinks it's cool. It looks like that on the surface, but to the people who really loved Walter for his character and was able to put a more closer, if not critical, eye to his character, they were the ones to realize the true and deeper meanings of why Walter did the sacrifice that he did with Lucifer. And to the people who were able to closely observe Walter, it left them with a sense of tears, if not great sorrow, for such a great character. It's just now gone, and thus is the pattern of your friends in SMT dying. It's quite a sad event, but honestly something that I feel really needs to be explained. This death is a lot more emotional than Jonathan's death per se, where he had a lightly and angelic fusion, not really harming him too much by the looks of things. Walter had to deal with the blood, gore, and guts and died out in the same way as someone in the world of strong would. But in a way, I guess you could say he won because he fused with the second strongest being on the planet, with you of course being the exception, Flynn the player character. To fast forward a little bit and to cap this section off, after the great sacrifice that Walter made so he can make his world of strong happen, it does happen. You take over Mikado successfully after defeating Merkaba, but through this chaos, the people need a leader, a true new king that Lucifer suggested you would be a great fit for. As if the chaos that the people are doing right now continues to happen, there won't be any people to begin with, because through chaos breeds more chaos, and you cannot find society through chaos alone. There must be some law, order, or reform. Now, let's talk about the symbolic themes that Walter carries as a character and why his symbolism outweighs more than his character at points in the story. And in a way, he kind of acts as more of a symbolic vehicle than a character at times, which can either be seen as a flaw or a great use of storytelling. But Steelies, let us further dissect into Walter's character in part 3, what he means on a symbolic level. Now, what Walter means at a more symbolic level is something I want to get into this section. So allow me to tell you what really makes Walter at a symbolic level. He's really a character of themes. He is a personification of those very themes and symbols I'll talk about in this section. The hidden story SMT IV doesn't really want to tell you with Walter is that he didn't want a world of the strong just because he wanted to do it for the lulz like a Dachi, or just because he wanted to do it just because it was there. No, he did this for the reason that he wanted to see change in his own society. He wanted to have the ability to have action and be able to change the course of his own destiny. But sadly, due to him being manipulated by Lilith and his limited knowledge and understanding of different forms of government, he saw that as the only way to get that supposed freedom of his, and that was to release the expanse and create a world of the strong. Damned be the consequences and anything else alongside it, because the current to last system he was living in was nothing but a caste system that would tell him that, hey, Walter, you're no more than the son of a fisherman who will remain under the thumb of all luxuriers, since pretty much that's what Calgeries and luxuriers were. They were stuck in one spot, just like a caste system. Your birth determined where you were in society, with the only exception to that was joining the leagues of the samurai. And even then, the people already at the top of the food chain can already be a samurai, so in many ways, you're just a more pampered version of a Calgery. Essentially, it's like the old money versus new money debate, where you're technically the new money out of the luxurier's old money, so to speak. When they already gained their positions at birth, pretty much Walter had to gain his through hard work and actually working for it. Which leads us to the next topic of how Walter, freedom, society, and his coming of age and hero's journey is something that should be talked about more in depth, and I'll do that right here. Walter's version of equality is very much kind of similar to ours in the fact that he wants people to be able to change their own destinies through their own strength and through their own hard-working hands. So in many ways, it parallels, if not reflects, the American values of pulling yourself from your own bootstraps. And that requires a certain resolve that not a lot of people have in SMT IV outside of your counterpart Jonathan and yourself, the player character. It's that very same determination and being so involved in the story that has allowed Walter to have his own hidden hero's journey, which is suddenly shown throughout SMT IV, through the time you first meet him all the way up to his sacrifice. And even in between Blasted and Infernal Tokyo, you really get to see Walter's character on display along with Jonathan's, but more so Walter than Jonathan. Throughout the story of SMT IV, you see Walter start off as more of a hot-headed, innocent, and overall unaware himbo in the beginning of the game. But throughout the story, as he sees more atrocities in Tokyo and finally learns the evil of Taiyama and everything behind the red pills, that's where you really start to see a turning point of his character. You really start to understand that he's aware of the horrors and tortures that have been conducted in both Tokyo and in Mikado. And at this point, with Mikado being under new management, he sees it as no different than being under Taiyama's thumb, being under the caste system's thumb, and being under society's thumb. This, of course, leads him into eventually deciding to break off from the ranks of the samurai and meeting up with Lilith at her temple, or the Ring of Gaia. It is at this very same temple Yuriko/Lilith tells them where they need to go next in order to achieve the world of the strong, aka releasing the expanse. And it is at this point in the story that we transition into Blasted/Inferno Tokyo. And assuming that you sided with Walter, you will eventually wake up in White Forest, where you get to find out who Hikaru is. And it turns out Hikaru is Lucifer. Shock and horror, who would have guessed? It is through this time that after defeating the White and eventually coming back to your own reality to release the world of the strong and making sure that everyone assimilates into that world of the strong, or in Walter's mind at least flourish, you are met with the grave news that either one of you will have to sacrifice yourself to Lucifer in order for Hikaru to gain her true power back. This is definitely devastating news nonetheless to hear, because you spent so many hours and you spent an entire journey with your fellow samurai to the point to where it's like to give up a companion feels weird. It feels unnatural. It feels unheard of. But at the very end, right when you choose to sacrifice yourself, if you make that text option, Walter cuts in and says, no, you can't die of all people. And he gives a pretty good speech about his acceptance of death and how he's peaked in his very own life. If he continues to live any longer, he fears he'll end up like Kiharu or Jonathan, where they're stuck in their ways to the point to where they can't advance as a people and they rather keep the status quo, the very same status quo that kept him down for many years growing up. And for his people, the Calzuries, many generations. Many generations. So he rather disrupt the natural order of things to allow people to create their own society through their own hands and grab their own destinies. And as repetitive as it sounds to say own a lot, it truly is the case that Walter wanted somebody in the world to be able to make their own destiny without having to feel the need to be stuck in one place in their own society, be stuck in one place to where they can't move. Walter closes out his beautiful speech with the fact that he had a very great time traveling with his fellow samurai and with the player character most of all. Once he wrapped up that quite tear-jerking speech, Lucifer said, "Alright, it's time to do the fusion." And afterwards, we see a bloody, gory mess. Something that once was Walter is just in a pool of blood. And after that very same pool of blood emerged a new type of beast. Something that wasn't human, something that wasn't even demon, something that was much more powerful than that. And it was none other than Demon Lord Lucifer himself, back in the flesh, back again ready to truly put the world into chaos. Something that Walter truly never intended to do, but was rather sadly manipulated into doing so. It is at this point in the story that we are to lead with Lucifer and then pretty much take over Mikado and throw it into chaos. Which eventually happens near the end of the game once you defeat Merkaba, and all you see is a pavement of fire and war and famine, with Lucifer telling you that you need to be the king, to reign over all of them, which is something that is very much against Walter's ideas of a free world. It's no more better than the caste system that you were in before. Now, it's at that very point when Walter sacrificed himself that he accepted his death, and he was willing to accept his death. And that's something you see in both characters, both Walter and Jonathan, but with Walter especially, he was willing to die for his ideals. Day one, he was willing to die for the very free world that he wanted to have. And that's something that shouldn't go unspoken, especially since SMT IV itself couldn't even properly explain Walter's motivations and reasons behind why he wanted the free world in the first place. He was a product of his society. He was burnt by the very same society that told him he was going to be no more than a fisherman. And through him gaining this wisdom and knowledge, he had the power to finally do something that could change the world as he knew it. Whether it was for better or worse, he had to do it since it was his way to impact the world. It was his way to show that he won't be stuck as the son of a fisherman. And it was that very same sacrifice that he knew he could die well, knowing that he changed the world in some way, that he's a part of something bigger. And that's all he really wanted to do in the first place, was to be a part of a world to where people can forge their own paths, they can follow their own rule books, and most importantly, they can be a part of something bigger than themselves. Now, I briefly want to talk about Walter's role as the protagonist in Demonic Gene. I'll review the entire manga in a separate video in the near future, so be sure to look out for that by turning on the notification bells for this channel and subscribing to TBAisen. Now, Walter hits pretty much the same similar strokes in the beginning. Dumb himbo with not a lot of knowledge in the beginning, and he's just kind of having a fun time being a samurai and killing demons. But the difference is, with Flynn being absent from the story and acting as more of a pushing antagonistic force from the background, he takes Walter's character and growth into a completely new direction. When Walter enters Tokyo, he's entering in there as a fugitive and not as a fellow samurai traveling with you under the orders of the kingdom. He quite literally is an escapee making his way into uncharted lands, which leads us to meet the Black Samurai a lot earlier than you would expect in the story. And the Black Samurai isn't who you expect it to be either. They're a completely different person tied to a new character who's introduced as Walter's childhood friend, Gina, who's also very important for the story as well. But due to avoid spoilers for that, since I want to say that for another video, now that we have Walter in a more protagonist-focused role, we can truly realize what he's thinking about at the very moment. When he was up against a certain foe near the end of the Demonic Gene manga, he truly starts to understand himself in a way that you couldn't really see in the original SMT IV. He understands that he needs to start thinking for himself through the influence of the antagonistic Flynn. Now you might be wondering, why is he antagonistic? How is he antagonistic? Once again, you'll find out in the next video, but it's that very same force, that mysterious Flynn looking spirit that is telling him that he needs to think for himself and do what he wants to do rather than follow the whims of someone else just because they tell him, hey, this is the right way to go. Because Demonic Gene Walter differs from SMT Walter in the fact that in the beginning of his story all the way up to practically the end, Demonic Gene or DG Walter's story was about him living for himself and learning how to make his own choices and understanding who he is as a person rather than being manipulated or guided to go somewhere else. Whereas SMT IV's Walter is more about him achieving a world where anybody can make their own destiny. Whether it be through strength or their own rules, they can achieve it. DG Walter learns a very important lesson near the end of Demonic Gene, and that lesson is he can't let his own power control him. If he lets his own power control him, he'll be no better than the demon that lent him power in the beginning of the story. He learned something that SMT Walter never learned to begin with. That very lesson is that even if you have power, even if you could change the world with a snap of your fingers, by changing the world, you would be changing the very things that you would hold important to yourself. Because you can't change one thing and keep things the same. There's always some sort of modification, altercation when it comes to change. For that's what it is. Change does not discriminate. Change is a vehicle that will always keep on happening. And it was that very same lust and greed for power that has eventually led him to the conclusion that if he were to change the world, what good would it do outside of changing the very things he held important to him at the end of the day? So in many ways, SMT Walter and Demonic Gene Walter are very different characters. And it is because of those differences that we can find and even compare and contrast how they end up to be two different characters. And overall, Walter really is just a great character. A lot of depth that's hidden beneath the story and something you really gotta look for and pay attention to throughout his dialogue. Because SMT IV sadly won't spell it out to you or put it on the forefront. Mainly because the game's pacing by itself just wasn't that great. It had decent pacing for a 3DS game, but it couldn't allow the characters to truly breathe and grow into themselves. It forced the alignment shift way too early. And the fact that it just doesn't give you any time to allow the characters to truly flesh themselves out, nor does the alignment really match with their ideals to begin with. Now with all that being said, let's move on to the next part, part 5, where I talk about how Walter is somebody I can truly relate to. There's one more thing I want to talk about in this video, and I want to talk about what Walter means to me and how I can relate to him on a more personal level, so to speak. Walter isn't just a silly himbo who decides, world of strength, let's change the world. No, Walter's a byproduct of his society, and that is shown both in the Demonic Gene manga and in SMT IV, but more persistent in the Demonic Gene manga. Just like I said in part 3, Walter was held back by his current system, and in a way, I kind of feel held back in my system. The system of capitalism, to where if you don't have a lot of capital to start off with, it's very tough to climb up. But at least there was a little bit of wiggle room, whereas Walter was sadly fated with a caste system to waste his days away as the son of a fisherman. Luckily, he was chosen as a samurai, and that got him the social elevation that he needed. But no matter how high he was in the social ladder, there is something that's always consistent about Walter in any iteration that he shows up in. And you know what that consistent trait is? It's his perseverance and resolve for his beliefs. Similar to myself, I consider myself a very stubborn person, just like Walter. And when it comes to my beliefs and morals, there's something that I always gotta stand my ground in, and that's my principles, because without my principles, who am I as a person? And that's how I see Walter. Walter is a man who's guided by his principles, by his ideologies and views of the world. He wants to live by his own playbook and not by another man's playbook, and I can relate to that a lot. It's one of my dreams to get YouTube to be so self-sustainable that I don't have to work a job anymore. While I can handle somebody else's rule, I much rather not have to follow the wills and whims of some other person's rule. I much rather be strong, independent, and be able to move for myself. And in a way, that's how I can really relate to Walter. I can relate to his persistence, his determination to get something done, to get stronger, to get better than he was the next day. He doesn't want things to stay status quo and stale, just like Jonathan. He wants to give people the chance to prove themselves through their own strength and might, whether it be their strength of character or their actual strength. Now, it ended up being more literal throughout the story, but I think what Walter was trying to show is that a strength of character can also carry you in this world versus, oh, I was born into a rich family, so I'm always going to be rich, and these peasants were born into a poor fishing family, so guess what they're going to have to do? They're going to have to fish. Fucking losers. So, the point I'm trying to make here is, Walter reminds me of myself. A really determined version of myself. A self that's willing to go as far as to even die for his own ideals. Now, will I ever go as far to die for something? Probably not at that point yet. But I do understand his resolve, and I strongly resonate with that. So whenever his points of resolve were shown through the story, I was always there to soak it up. Soak up that resolve that Walter has decided to have. And it's because he goes by his own playbook. I love how he speaks so bluntly. Due to the condition that I have, called Asperger's, I tend to speak bluntly. Bluntly so in the fact that it's really hard to mince words. I just gotta really say something, and when I say it, it's just that. I don't like to go around in circles, go around in loops, talk around circles. I don't like to do any of that. Just rather get to the point, talk to it straight, and get it done. Walter is not only a byproduct of his society, he is what happens when you let an underrepresented group of people to rot away in the dirt, to rot away in the dust. It just leaves you with a certain feeling that is hard to describe at first, but it's empathy. You understand Walter's plights, you understand his struggles, you understand why he wants to change the world. He wants to have the power to choose his own destiny. He wants to have the ability to move around. What he needs is a class system, and he just sadly that just didn't really exist in Mikado or his thought process, which leaves us with the title of this video, The Sacrifice Behind the Hoi. So remember, viewers of this video and Steelies, behind every Hoi there is a great sacrifice that is attached to it. Behind every himbo smile there is a person, a man, a woman, a child, somebody struggling beneath that smile. And with that, I'll end the video out here. Thank you for watching. Hey everyone, thank you for staying along for the MCU after credits. This was my first time doing a character analysis on Walter. or an SMT character in general. And I just want to say, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to consider to leave a like and a comment down below in the comment section. And if you really enjoy what I do and want to see more essays, analysis, and video content like this, or hell, even roast of some sort, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you know as soon as possible when you can get my videos. Be sure to share this with a friend or two, and with all of that being said, you all have a good one, and remember, there's always a sacrifice behind every hoy. And remember, Steelies, don't get caught.